Okay, and on to our last video for the week. We're looking at I think, pretty fun article by Julian Thomas called The Buddhist Virtues of Raging Lust and Crass Materialism in Contemporary Japan. And if you're a little surprised by that title, that is his intent. Normally, lust and materialism are not seen as virtues in Buddhism or basically in any other religion. But he is looking at a kind of unusual temple in a cool neighborhood in Tokyo called Kichijoji. That is, a very old temple, but taking a very new approach to marketing itself, teaming up with a merchandising company and creating anime and video games and characters out of its deities that are enshrined in the temple. We see here the sign that welcomes people to the temple, designed by a artist named Toromi, who becomes herself an incarnation, in a sense, of Benzaiten, the central deity at the temple, shown here on the right. And if you notice, each of these different deities has a QR code that you could scan with your phone, and it tells you more about the deities themselves. And we'll see a little intro video, animated video that the temple made for itself in just a minute. But I want to remind you of the participation question for this video is, even though Ryōhōji's marketing campaign is a bit unusual, it symbolizes something bigger about the situation about Buddhism in contemporary Japan. So as you watch this video, ask yourself, what is it that it symbolizes? Okay, so Thomas opens up his article saying he's going to challenge this idea that Buddhism is in decline or in crisis in contemporary Japan. This is a popular idea both among scholars and among Buddhists themselves. And we'll get to that in a minute, the decline narrative and why Thomas challenges it. But he also says that there's 5 related sub-ideas tied in with this critique, with this concept of Buddhism being in crisis. One of them is saying that there's this thing called pure Buddhism, and that pure Buddhism is being corrupted by its connections with popular culture, which targets audiences' desires for sexual stimulation and or material things. 2, that Buddhist clerics, right, the clergy, like priests and monks, are collaborating with for-profit companies, and this is a cynical survival strategy, again, that goes against Buddhism's pure or true form. 3, related, that religious doctrine is exclusively, right, and should be created, maintained, and policed by clerics, the clergy. 4, that religious doctrine can and should be insulated from economic concerns. And 5, that religious practice can and should be, quote, devout, austere, and humorless, right? No fun with ritual. Okay, well, we'll see that Ryōhōji, right, denies all these things, and Thomas argues that it is indicative of larger trends in Buddhism that go back centuries and are not unusual and are actually part of how Japanese Buddhism has existed for a long time. Okay, but we do see major kind of differences in this time in some sense. On the right is a traditional statue of Benzaiten, the deity that is enshrined in Ryōhōji, developed from the Hindu goddess Saraswati. Benzaiten is often associated with music, performance, and at Ryōhōji, Benzaiten has been reimagined by this artist Toromi as Toro Benten on the bottom here. Well, let's just watch a little bit of the intro video. Oh, can I even do that? Okay, well, you can watch the intro video yourself, there are links in the article itself to these videos. But this is the intro video for the the temple. Then uh, the intro video has it's very animated, fast paced, done in very cutesy fashion. The characters with these large eyes, are known as moe, and um, Todo Benten is actually fairly clothed despite a short skirt, but a second deity, um, which her traditional name is Kichijoten or Kishoten, who's known for being the goddess of beauty and fertility, is shown in a much more erotic way in the second video, and there's also a link in the article for that. That is on this DVD that's sold by the temple on the top left. There's a lot of focusing on her breasts, on her crotch area. There's a lot of double entendres with Buddhist terms like release, which is normally seen as a liberation from samsara into nirvana, which kind of has a sexual connotation here. She calls out for the listener to find refuge in me, which again has a Buddhist context, but is kind of can be understood in this kind of sexual way. And not only that, but the actress who portrays what they call Kisyo Ten Misa, or Kishoten, right, the name of the goddess, has a background in pornographic films and is what they call a tarento, a kind of a minor celebrity in Japan. So yeah, you can see why maybe the temple has been criticized for using these what were sometimes called aidoru or idols in promoting their temple. They've also done other innovative promotions. This is a video game that you can also kind of see. This is a screen grab from YouTube um, for this game, which is called Okyo no Tatsujin, or Sutra Master. And in this video game, Todo Benten is ringing the bell along with chanting sutras. And so this actually has a lot of religious content in it in some sense. And she's accumulating 10, you can see in the top right corner. It's a play on words. It's both points and like their heavenly deities. She accumulates merit. The ancestors, I think, at the bottom, these kind of family tombs are dancing along and are very happy. So it's kind of this very interesting intersection of Japanese popular culture and traditional Buddhist iconography and teachings. Okay, so this Ryōhōji has stimulated debate among its temple members in popular media, such as television shows and newspapers, and among the general public, who are commenting on their YouTube videos and their Twitter feed um, about how appropriate is this media. Are the temple-sponsored events, such as the maid cafes or the pop music concerts with these two idols, um, and also the merchandise they're selling, whether it's Emma, seen here on the bottom right, a traditional thing that you'll see at Japanese temples where you can write your wishes and hang them up, or more kind of contemporary character goods like file folders and figurines of their kind of anime or manga looking deities. DVDs that, like I mentioned before, kind of have this erotic content to them, and video games. And Thomas argues that this debate benefits all the different parties. The temple, Hachifuku, the company that was created to create these characters and the merchandise, the different cosplay idols themselves, they all get attention and money from this. And for the temple, maybe promoting the temple is also promoting Buddhism and maybe bringing people to the Dharma. He argues that fans and pilgrims, that consumers and believers are not as clear cut and easily distinguishable as other theorists might want to argue. Second, the media themselves, the newspapers, the TV shows, the blogs, Thomas argues, all boost their sales and ratings with such a catchy and provocative story. And not to leave us out of the mix, he says that scholars also, find easy publishing, whether they are celebrating these innovative uh, uh, ways that Buddhism is promoting itself, or whether they are lamenting the decline of Buddhism. But, he asks, is Buddhism really in decline? Well, yeah, there are certain ways that it's pretty clear that contemporary Buddhist temples are having problems. In the post war period, due to the American occupation, there were legal changes in Japan that made it harder for temples to collect income in certain ways. We know that they were already hurting in the Meiji period when they had persecution from the government. Um, so yeah, there's been a long time where people have said that Buddhism is in decline. Um, they also have been criticized for being complicit with the Japanese government's war crimes and things like that during the World War II. Also, that they are exploitative of families who have deceased loved ones, as they make most of their money off of funerals, which are very expensive. Um, and then they're even in more trouble because now non-Buddhist funeral services are on the rise. So even that source of income is decreasing. And perhaps most problematic, particularly for rural temples, is that the rural population of Japan is in steep decline as people move to the cities and the population ages. So there are no longer local households to support these rural temples, and many of them are closing. But he wants to point out Buddhists have been saying that Buddhism is in decline for the last 2,500 years, since the time of Shakyamuni himself. Ever since Buddhism came to Japan, there's been this narrative about that we are in the age of Mappo, the age of the latter Dharma, when Buddhism becomes corrupt. And this has been particularly stressed by Nichiren Buddhism, which is the sect that Ryōhōji belongs to. And interestingly, Nichiren, right, focuses on the power of the Lotus Sutra, right, because people in this corrupt age cannot use their own power, but they need the power of this mysterious Dharma. And you may remember, right, we read this, the Lotus Sutra has this parable of the burning house, which justifies using expedient means, right, like telling your children that there are ox carts and deer carts outside to get them to the Dharma and away from the out of samsara, right? To get the ignorant people to Dharma. It's okay maybe to use falsehoods or what Thomas calls a spoonful of sugar in your preaching to get them to take their Dharma medicine. So, in summary, Thomas wants to say, many Japanese Buddhist temples are having difficulties, but if you look at Japanese Buddhist history, there's long been connections with popular culture, including a lot of entertainment, which sometimes does have sexy themes, and certainly material culture. That the collaboration with Buddhist clerics and for profit companies can be understood as a kind of expedient means and is not necessarily a cynical ploy for keeping themselves alive, a sort of cynical survival strategy, as he called it earlier. That lay people, not just clerics, have had a long history of helping shape religious doctrine. That religious doctrine has never been insulated from economic concerns, and that ritual practice can be both fun and sincere. And I just want to close with a few other examples from Kyoto, where I've been living the last couple of years. Here's a temple called Otagi Nembutsuji that has recently attracted a lot of tourists um, because of this razan, these statues of the disciples of the Buddha that were made as part of a fundraising uh, campaign in the 1980s by their former priest, who is an artist, and he kind of had a sculptor teach lay people how to make these concrete statues, and they paid for it, and the money went to the temple, and now this has become a tourist attraction, and they're very cute, but sometimes don't seem very quote unquote Buddhist. You can see on the bottom left someone's holding up a cat. Here's some monks drinking. There's a guy with sunglasses. I mean, what does this all have to do with Buddhism? But at the same time, it does kind of encourage lay practitioners to devote themselves to the temple, and it also helps keep the temple alive. Here's another example. It's been in the news a lot lately of this $1 million robot, Androido Kanonminda, who's supposed to be an incarnation of Avalokiteshvara, here reciting and kind of reciting the Heart Sutra and also kind of an explanation of the Heart Sutra. So again, attracts a lot of people to the temple and engages them in some sort of Buddhist discourse. So maybe a kind of expedient means. And finally, kind of a silly one. This is Kiyomizu-dera, one of Kyoto's most famous temples, that hosted a folding screen that did a Star Wars spin on their famous screens of the Thunder God and the Wind God, here done with Kylo Ren and Rey from The Force Awakens. So, anyway, to conclude, Ryōhōji's marketing campaign may be unusual in some sense, but it does symbolize a bigger teaching about the status of Buddhism in contemporary Japan. So if you could just write a little bit about that for your participation question, I'd be very happy to give you some credit for participating in week 12. Thanks so much for your attention, and I hope you all stay safe out there in this quarantine. And yeah, and I hope you enjoyed the week's readings and videos. And we got one more week left, week 13, where we're going to look at East Asian religion in global circulation.